Support this podcast via our Patreon and get more writerly goodness. Visit patreon.com/nanocast to join up.
Welcome to NaNoWriMo Every Month. My name is J. Daniel Sawyer. I'm the author of some 20 books, 34 short stories, and numerous articles and other things, and I am your guide on this journey to use NaNoWriMo to level up to professional output levels. Welcome to The Questions, Episode 84. Well, we've had a few days of doing legal and business stuff, so let's circle back around to craft for the next few days. Today, Sergeant Mike asks, could you give us the lowdown and dirty on subplots within the larger story? As I do writing exercises and listen to/read other writing experts, this topic comes up, and I find that I can't tell if I'm doing these right. Okay, so this question is vague enough that it took me a little while to figure out how to get my teeth into it, but I think the best way to explain it is by talking about the two basic kinds of subplots there are. One subplot is a pad loop, and the other is a plot thread. A pad loop is a part of the story that is there primarily to take up space and increase your word count. You could completely cut it out, and it wouldn't make much of a difference to the surrounding story. You could heal the tear with a couple of paragraphs of exposition or other sorts of stuff like that. A plot thread is a section of the story that winds through the whole story from beginning to end and feeds into the main line of the story. So if you look at your story like a rope, each line of interest running through the story is its own plot line, whether you explore each of those interest lines from its own point of view or not. Generally speaking, your main character's through line is your main plot, and the through lines of your ancillary characters or the enterprises they're engaged in are your subplots. So we'll return to a cultural touchstone to give you an idea of this. In Star Wars, the original Star Wars trilogy, not the prequels, but the ones that my generation grew up on. The main plot line is that the rebels are fighting the Empire and trying to destroy the Emperor. In each of the 3 installments, this takes a different form. But as a result of this main plot, there are a bunch of subplots that take shape. There's, say for example, the subplot where Han gets kidnapped and sold to Jabba the Hutt in Carbon Freeze, and the good guys have to go rescue him. That's a subplot. It doesn't really make any difference to the main plot, except that it changes Han's general character and outlook, so it serves his character development and feeds back into the main plot. But it doesn't have anything directly to do with fighting the Empire. It's going off on a side trip in order to get something done that has to feed back into the main plot. That's a subplot that works as a plot thread because it connects back into the main story, and what is accomplished and revealed in that side story has a direct bearing on the rest of the action after that point. A pad loop would be more like what you see in serialized television, where you have obstacles that appear in the way of the main character that require them or a secondary character to go off on a side adventure that accomplishes nothing except eliminating that obstacle that was incidental to the main plot and didn't really matter to the main plot anyway. I think I recently heard Brandon Sanderson making the distinction between a complication and an obstacle. An obstacle is something that gets in the way of your main character and holds up your main plot. It has to be resolved in order for the main plot to go forward, but resolving it doesn't actually change the main character or advance the main plot in any way. That's a pad loop. A complication is where the interests of another character or organization or whatnot impinge upon a main plot in a way that transforms the story from that point forward. That thing that is impinging is its own subplot. If you jumped heads over into the characters that bring that element into the plot, you have a subplot involving them advancing their interests, which then conflict with your main character's interests. Now, all that said, this really isn't something that I have ever thought about in a prescriptive sense. The terminology of plots and subplots is a way to describe a book that has already been written, to someone who is interested in it. It's usually not the kind of thing you plan out in advance unless you're doing screenwriting. It's just a way that stories are told. The more complicated your story, the more subplots you'll have, and the better you get at storytelling, the fewer of those subplots will be obstacles, and the more of them will be complications. So, don't think about it too much. Just focus on making a good story in which everything is moving forward, and everything that happens, whether it's the character development of your main characters or your secondary characters, or it deepens the world you're in, or whatever, everything that shows up on the page should, in some vital way, advance the story. Otherwise, you're just hanging around and padding words out so that you can make an arbitrary length, and then you're trying to force the story to be something that it really doesn't want to be or need to be. And that's where stories start to lose their steam and energy and start to become boring to read. I hope that helps, and I'll see you tomorrow. NaNoWriMo Every Month is written and presented by J. Daniel Sawyer and produced by Artistic Whispers Productions. Visit our website at nanowrimoeverymonth.com and leave a tip in the tip jar or join the Patreon to support this podcast. NaNoWriMo Every Month is copyright 2016 by J. Daniel Sawyer and Artistic Whispers Productions and is released under a Creative Commons Non-Commercial Attribution No Derivatives license.